Merry January! I hope if you're watching this on release day you had a brilliant holiday break, and if you're watching this from the future, well, I still hope your day was pretty cool. So I got the idea all the way back in about October, and mostly inspired by Reddit, to sew myself a fun Christmas dress. But buoyed by an inexplicable and very brief bout of self-confidence, I asked Dave if he would also like me to make him a matching Christmas shirt. To be honest, I fully expected him to say no and I would look like the best girlfriend ever for offering, but you're watching a video with a title something to do with a Christmas shirt, so you can kind of see how that went. Today I will basically be taking you through all of the lessons I learned from this project, which is the perfect excuse to talk about festive things, even though it's now January. Smooth. Okay, I chose this pattern, McCall's M6044, almost entirely because it's a very popular pattern, and that's honestly my first lesson I want to share with you. I'd never sewn a shirt before, this is completely out of my comfort zone, so choosing something so popular meant that there were videos, photos, blog posts absolutely everywhere full of helpful tips and details on how other people had approached this. I want to give a special shout out to Saturday Night Stitch on YouTube, who made this stunningly helpful sew-along video taking you through every step from the point of view of someone who is already familiar with this pattern. She explains the whys and the wherefores as she's going in a way that makes it seem all really achievable, even for an idiot like me. Thank you so much to Saturday Night Stitch, and I'll make sure that video is linked down in the description for anyone else thinking of tackling this pattern. Okay, so with the pattern choice made, I left it up to Dave to choose the fabric, which is how we ended up with this very tasteful and not at all tacky fabric featuring doggos in various festive situations. It's not cotton poplin, which I think is what you're supposed to use to make shirts with. It's just random cotton from eBay, I don't know. We knew it was probably going to crease quite badly on the day, but honestly, you spend most of Christmas Day drunk, so who cares, right? The very first piece of advice I got on this project from a helpful sewist over on Mastodon was to definitely not skip the muslin. And you know what? For once, I actually listened. So a lot of the lessons I learned on this project were learned on the muslin. Thank God. Lesson 2, muslins are not a waste of time and they are totally worth it. Listen when people say this. I'm convinced and I'm never going back, especially if it's a project like this where I'm doing something I have never done before. Luckily for me, Pound Fabrics recently ran a sale where I picked up an absolute ton of this muslin-adjacent fabric for 50p a metre, so you can't really go wrong there. I know it's wiser to make your muslin from very similar fabric to your final item, and I also know that if everything goes well you can end up with 2 totally wearable garments. However, I just straight up couldn't afford more cotton on the run up to Christmas, and also lesson 3, using really cheap muslin fabric lets you make mistakes and learn without freaking out about it. It is admittedly a bit of a waste of fabric, but I can always repurpose that as general household cloths or something, and in the meantime, just the lack of stress from knowing this wasn't supposed to be a wearable garment was totally worth it. Lesson 4, much to my displeasure, is to not underestimate the importance of a sharp pair of scissors. I'd been using this pair for literally years with no problems. They're obviously not proper fabric scissors, but I play by my own rules and they were always fine. Until I picked them up to work on this project and just sudden absolute dullness. I managed to hack through the muslin fabric just about, but it gave me a blister on my thumb and I immediately ordered an emergency pair of these beauties as a replacement. £6 on Amazon, they've been brilliant so far and they're pretty. As a side note, I have asked and he swears he didn't use my scissors for anything naughty, so I choose to believe him and will just chalk it up to one of those things. Lesson 5 I learned really quickly, and it's to use a nice long stitch length on your muslin. It makes it so much easier to rip everything back out, and if you're anything like me, you will be doing a lot of that. Using this black thread that was already in my machine was just a result of laziness, but actually the contrast of it also really helped with seeing what I was doing when I was frogging stitches, so that can be kind of a bonus tip there. Everything seemed to be going okay. I navigated the sleeve slit section much better on my second attempt, and I was feeling great until... Turns out I'd managed to somehow, and I still don't even know how, make both sleeves the same. Please tell me I am not the only one to have done this. Lucky it was on the muslin, right? I'm not sure don't make both of your sleeves the same is even a lesson to anyone else, but whatever, let's just slap it on there anyway as a very obvious but very important lesson 6. My next realisation was actually something I've picked up over a few attempts at using these old-fashioned paper patterns from the big companies. They tend to be a lot less hand-holdy than indie patterns, and I have to say sometimes they can be quite unclear in what they're asking you to do. For example, this pattern asked me to attach the cuff to the sleeve. However, the cuff was created from two pieces, one trimmed shorter than the other, and it's pure 50-50 coincidence that I actually attached the correct side. I later realised that it does become clear which side to attach if you look at the image rather than just reading the instructions. So that's lesson 7. Make sure to look at both the text and image instructions because one of them may raise questions that the other one answers. Now, for some reason, pre-project, when I was busy having a meltdown over how complicated a shirt was going to be, I kept coming back to the collar as the thing I was really dreading. I had no clue how such a thing was constructed, and I feared it greatly. But let me tell you, a collar is not the thing to fear on a project like this. It's the sleeves! I spent so long pinning and repinning and trying to ease the sleeves into the armholes. That Saturday Night Stitch video had some great tips, but I don't know what it was. I think maybe I hadn't cut the pieces out accurately enough due to my scissor situation. And eventually I just had to give up, and I think there was about an inch of fabric on each side of each sleeve that I ended up just chopping off because it wouldn't fit. This is definitely not recommended, but I knew this was just the muslin. I thought I'd see how that fits, and I'd make an effort to do it better on the real fabric shirt. It was really frustrating. So yeah, lesson 8, if a piece is supposed to fit inside another piece, really take your time and make sure they are cut out accurately because you're going to cause yourself so much trouble otherwise. Now, I believe this was the point where the pattern asked me to hem the shirt, but I hate hemming things. I've literally never managed to get a hem to lie flat in my entire life. So when the sew along video suggested maybe leaving this part until later, I jumped on it without any further questions asked. Unfortunately, by this point I was kind of skipping through the video to look for certain things, and I missed the surrounding context of leaving the hem until later. So I followed the next instruction from the pattern, installed the button placket with really no bother at all, and then realised that to do it the way the pattern asked me to, I actually did need to have already hemmed the shirt. Honestly, this is not a problem with the sew-along video, this is entirely on me for doing things out of order and for not watching that whole section. But I would say if your skill level is more like mine, maybe just stick to the order of events in the pattern instructions. They're written that way for a reason, and once you understand more about what you're doing, then you can start making changes to the process and make things more efficient. Before I knew it, and with only some mild confusion, the collar was in. I'm not sure what I've done to Dave that he fears me so, but he seemed to not want to admit that the arms were a bit tight due to my sleeve kerfuffle. So, pro tip, if you're an intimidating kind of person, maybe don't trust your client to be totally honest about the fit. Luckily though, I do have eyes, and I could see the problem for myself. But I was also pretty confident that I knew what caused the issue and that I could solve it on the next go round. Everything else was perfect as far as he was concerned, and now I understood the construction of a shirt, I was raring to go. No more lessons to be learned here, right? Lesson 10. If you're using fabric with a print like mine here, don't assume it's been cut straight. I actually wasted half an hour marking out pieces before I realised how wonky this is. In the end, I had to pin all the way up the selvage to get it to fold right and stop being wonky. Just honestly so glad I caught that before cutting. It was a really close run thing. I spent forever cutting out all the pieces as accurately as I could with my fancy new scissors, but even with genuine effort, I'm pretty sure there was a lot of slippage. I'm not sure if that's something I can actually fix with technique, or if this is a case where genuinely a rotary cutter and a mat would make all the difference. I suspect probably a little bit of both. Still, these pieces were definitely a lot better than the ones for my muslin, and it's all about improving compared to past you. I knocked out the matching interfacing, which I didn't add to the muslin because that was really more about me learning the construction, you know? And then of course did the attaching. But dear viewer, you will be shocked to hear that I took this opportunity to also iron all of the other pieces one more time, even the non-interfaced ones. That is so terribly unlike me, but I have to say it made things go a lot smoother, so yeah. Lesson 11, all of that pressing they ask you to do actually does have a point. I had a fancy pants idea to pattern match the pocket on the front, but I was too scared to try that straight off, so I skipped it for now and blazed through the easy parts that I definitely knew how to do. On that first night, I think I got the body parts attached and the sleeves made up, complete with cuffs. Sadly, I didn't notice this until right at the end when I was attaching the buttons, but even though these cuffs look okay, they're kind of wildly different sizes. That isn't a cut issue, so it must be an execution issue. Maybe I accidentally sewed at the wrong seam allowance or something. Not really sure, but you know, it's a Christmas Day shirt, so whatever. As I said, I'd been really careful when I was cutting out the pieces this time round, and it really did make a big difference. However, it still took 3 attempts to get those sleeves in. Even then, one of the sleeves ended up with this tiny gather at the top. Super frustrating. But this is the kind of thing where you should consider lesson 12. Sometimes it's better to just let the little mistakes go and have a break rather than pushing yourself trying to get it perfect. But I knew 100% before I even asked him that there's no way this tiny little pucker would bother Dave. So why stress myself out trying to fix it, you know? I took the rest of the night off, watched some football, and when I came back to it the next day, this bothered me a lot less and I was able to just get on with a clear mind. This time I followed my own advice and I did the hem when the pattern asked me to. Can we please take a second to just appreciate how well this worked? I'll put up photos of some other hems I've attempted so you can see where I'm coming from with this. Once again, Saturday Night Stitch had some great tips for handling the curved hem and I was absolutely chuffed with the result. Hems? No problem. I thought it made sense to attach the underneath button placket first in case I mucked it up, so I grabbed an example shirt from Dave's wardrobe just to make sure I was doing things the right way around. As you can see, this is a man in dire need of me to learn how to sew good shirts. Gross. Anyway, the first placket, or are they 2 halves of 1 placket? I don't actually know. It went on fine. In fact, close to perfect. So naturally I buggered up the second, visible placket instead. Hooray! I think the issue here was that the 2 pieces of fabric shifted against each other without me noticing, and when I went to sew them, one of them was being stitched very close to the edge. So when I turned the placket inside out, that bottom part just immediately frayed and came apart. The problem was I'd already trimmed it to turn it inside out, so there was nothing left to really stitch back together. I did manage to bodge it, and it's unnoticeable as far as major flaws go, but it was pretty annoying and it taught me the essential lesson 13. Check and triple check everything is okay with your seams before you grade them. Now, remember back at the beginning when I got the excellent advice not to skip a muslin? Well, that same person had a second tip for me, which is basically you need to account for the folding of the collar and make sure the pattern sits the right way around when the collar is folded down. Despite this advice, I managed to still muck it up and had to recut, so that brings us to lesson 14, spatial awareness is very important when it comes to collars. Other than that though, the rest of it went pretty well. I had an almost completed shirt, Dave insisted it fit just the same as the muslin, even though there was like 2 inches extra armpit room in this one, thus proving that he's an unreliable narrator. And all I needed to do was spend the next few days plucking up the courage to try buttonholes. Lesson 15. Sewing machines with a built-in buttonhole function are literally humanity's greatest invention. Oh, and also do a practice run first. You're supposed to use a chisel to open the holes, but we don't have a sharp one and I was done spending money, so craft knife it is. This actually worked perfectly, so I'll probably buy myself some more of these if I get really into making shirts. I did make some mistakes, and a couple of the holes turned out slightly too small for the buttons at first. Luckily, it turns out you can do a passable job of snipping the hole open a bit further and then hand stitching around it. You can see there this buttonhole doesn't look as neat as the others, but it is secure and the button actually goes through it, which is definitely better than what was here before. One of the very last things I did was remember, oh, there's supposed to be a pocket on this. The idea was that by waiting until the end I could maybe find just a random bit of scrap fabric that happened to exactly match the position of the pattern where the pocket was supposed to go. I don't know, I take being frugal to a nonsensical place sometimes, okay? Theory was I could put my pattern piece down on the shirt, I could trace around some of those dogs and use that traced outline to find the correct bit of fabric to use. It did not work at all. It's just close enough to be obvious that there was an attempt, but too far away to look like any form of success. Need to revisit that technique, I think, but hey, I tried. And lo, a shirt was born.
I'm very happy with the shirt that I've been given. Right, that's it.
Okay,
We're
fine.
done.
Alright, let's not talk about the lessons learned from making my matching dress, but I can sum up by saying, don't get cocky and think just because you've made a shirt you can do no wrong. You can still make plenty of stupid mistakes. Some flaws in both of these outfits, but I love that I made a shirt. Dave seemed to love wearing it, and his mum certainly loved that we matched on Christmas morning. It's been a few weeks now, and I still keep looking at how tidy that hem is and how both sides of the front of the shirt are the same length, and I am just stunned. I'm not sure I've ever been prouder of anything in my whole life. I certainly learned a lot, and now I hope I've maybe passed 1 or 2 new tips on to you too. Feels a bit like I've conquered sewing now, if I'm honest, which is good because I have quite a big project coming up in that area soon. Nudge nudge, wink wink. Thanks for watching. I'll be back soon with some more crafty nonsense, so in the meantime, have a brilliant rest of your day and keep making cool stuff. Bye!